Ashes by J.C. Jarrett. Chapter 1. The Call of the Blade. Her red hair laid fanned out from her head and entwined into the grass. The young woman's breathing was slow and smooth, almost not even noticeable. She laid so still that without a close inspection most would have believed her dead. But as she lay there in unconscious, seeming at peace, her surroundings were not. Her family home, no more than 35 yards away, lay in smoldering ruin. The girl's mother and father rested inside the husk of a home, no more than husks themselves. The bloodied corpses of Alistair de Crystal's men lay about the grounds like a child had left out their toy soldiers. A pale green long finger's hand, with yellow jagged fingernails, reached out for the young woman's throat. The hand rested gently on the girl's exposed neck for several seconds, feeling the throb of her pulse under its gnarled fingers. Yellow orbs inspected the girl for wounds, but finding none. Slowly the young woman began to stir. Crouching low, the pale green creature hurried away, its large feet never making a noise. Jana's eyes opened in a start, as the young woman sat bolt upright, her breath catching in her throat. "Mother?" she called, her voice disturbing the silence that had fallen over the area. Jana grabbed at her chest, where the balls of energy had struck her hours before, as she looked about, taking in the change that had come over her home. Her eyes stopped on the still smoldering house. A look of shock filled her face. Getting quickly to her feet, she moved toward the smoking ruin, each step seeming to weigh 100 pounds. Jana's breath caught in her throat as the entwined charred corpses came into view. They seemed to have died with their arms embracing each other and their heads together. She knew instantly that they must be her parents. She stared in shock for several seconds, unable to believe the sight before her. Tears began to run slowly down the young woman's face, as her lower lip trembled uncontrollably. Suddenly, without warning, her knees gave way, dropping the sobbing girl to the ground. "Mother? Father?" The girl managed to get past her lips, followed by the only question her mind could form. "Why?" The young woman seemed to shrink and revert to a scared little girl. She curled onto her side, clutching her knees. Her cries and sobs echoed along the rolling farmland, the sound coming back to her ears, almost as if the land grieved with her. The passage of time seemed to halt for the anguished young woman. She knew not how long she lay there, but at some point, the gods took mercy on her and cast her into a dream-filled sleep. Visions plagued her restless sleep. She saw an image of an armored, decaying creature whose left eye was filled with stars. A skeleton draped in ancient rags throwing balls of fire at a hooded warrior holding twin swords that glowed in a golden light. And last, the silver longsword that belonged to her mother stood on its point with no outside assistance, its blade glowing a bright blue as a deep voice called her name. Jana's eyes snapped open, finding a cloudy night. She sat up, rubbing her temples in an effort to remove the jumble of strange images from her mind. She looked again at the remains of her parents. A single tear rolled down her cheek as the heavens broke and released a soft rain that joined her tears as if the heavens was mourning her loss as well. Grief struck her like a fist as she looked at the ashes of her life. She knew things would never be the same from this day on. The more she looked, the more the grief began to roll into rage, into desire for revenge on the men that did this. She imagined how it would feel to pass her blade through that wizard or his boss, Alistair, and that's when she heard the deep voice again. "Jana." The deep voice seemed to fill her ears. Fast as a whip she spun, dropping low into a defensive stance. Even though she had no weapon at hand, she was still ready to fight. To her surprise, there was no one there. She had expected to have someone behind her. "Jana," the voice rang out again. Suddenly, the blackness of the night gave way to a bright blue glow. Turning, Jana found she was witness to a sight from her visions. Her mother's silver longsword stood upright on its point, its blade pulsing with magical light. "Jana, please come closer." The voice came to her again. Jana looked at the glowing sword, remembering her mother saying that she felt it had a mind of its own. The young woman was very apprehensive over the suddenly active intelligence in the blade, and she stood for a while, contemplating her next move. The green-skinned brow furrowed in worry over the yellow-orbed eyes. The green creature watched intently as the young red-haired woman stared at the glowing longsword. He had seen the smoke billowing into the air like a beacon. He had traveled as fast as he could to get here, but ultimately it was too late. To his dismay, everybody was dead or gone when he arrived. Grumneck the goblin continued to watch the daughter of his human friend. He knew that he would need to keep her safe. He owed that much to Peyton. So much the young woman looked like her mother, but she possessed her father's ice-blue eyes. He thought of the humans, Peyton and Elisa, that had treated him like one of their own, like family. Even after and during the Goblin Wars, he was treated with respect and kindness. These good people did not deserve this, he said to himself in the guttural goblin language. Jana slowly reached out for the silver hilt of the magical blade. The moment her fingers touched its leather-wrapped hilt, more visions entered her mind. Again she saw the hooded warrior with the twin glowing swords, battling the rag-draped skeleton throwing fire. The vision of the decaying monster with the left eye full of stars was also now joined with a dark image of a woman made of shadow, with hair of fire, cutting down dozens of people with a large sword. After several swings of the huge blade, the fiery woman raised her gaze upon Jana, as if she could see her. The eyes of the shadow form were filled with fire. They seemed to bore into the young woman. In a great swirl of shadow and flame, the figure rushed toward Jana. The vision suddenly ended as Jana pulled her hand away from the sword. She looked about frantically, as if expecting the apparition to be upon her. What did all this mean, the young woman thought? Why was she seeing these horrible visions? Apprehensively, Jana lightly touched the sword's hilt once again. To her surprise, nothing happened. Closing her hand around the hilt, the glow slowly faded away, and she felt the full weight of the sword drop into her hand. She raised the blade, and was amazed at how it felt so natural in her hand, like she had been wielding this blade for years. She had put the sword through a few attack routines when she was younger, but then the sword almost seemed to fight her movements. But not now. It felt like an extension of her hand. Jana turned back and looked at the still smoldering house. I promise, you will be avenged. This I swear with my own life, the angered young redhead said. I love you both. Be at peace, she finished, her voice breaking. 000. Jander let his sight drift into his night vision, his head pounded in pain from the loss of his eye. He traveled along the road that passed through a dense wooded area, wishing he had his horse, and dreading Lord de Crystal's wrath when he found out he left the Westlake farm without disposing of the bodies as he was told. On top of his headache, his still-healing wound in his belly was causing tinges of pain, but onward he pushed himself. The highborn knew that the pillar of smoke that had been cast up into the sky from the burning house may have been seen by a Port Haven patrol, who would definitely come to investigate a fire that size. The woodland opened onto some low rolling plains, and the road the highborn had been traveling ended at a much larger, well-traveled road. West would lead him toward the Empress Mountains, while east would take him to the city of Port Haven. Port Haven it is, the highborn said, in his strangely broken cadence.